Yes!
All right, we're live. All right, welcome everybody. We're here at the Fasting Escape. It's just the heart of summer, and we're happy to have my friend and my mentor, Dr. Doug Lisle, here give us a talk here at the Fasting Escape. So welcome everybody. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll look forward to hearing some more.
Fantastic. All right, thanks for having me. All right, so I'm here with Dr. AJ. You have the honorary doctorate. There you go. Dr. Nathan Gershfeld, two of my favorite people, and got a nice group of folks here. Some of them are inmates here at the beautiful Fasting Escape. Inmates doing okay?
Excellent.
Yeah, we got 3 thumbs up and some marginals. That's how that works. Yeah, that means everything's working according to plan. And we got some family and friends here, which is terrific. All right. I think what we're going to do is we're going to do kind of a smattering of a few different things that are some of the key principles to trying to stay on a healthy track. So we'll talk a little bit about the pleasure trap, and then we'll also talk a little bit about struggles that we have socially with friends, family, and acquaintances, about how the kind of obstacles that they can give us and how to maneuver that. So we're going to begin with the biggest question and the biggest struggle that we have, and that is, why is it that once we know the right thing to do, we actually know what direction we should be going, why is it so difficult to go there? So that's really the biggest mystery that there is, and there's many different theories and ideas about this, but here today you're going to hear the correct one. Yeah, that's not a problem. So we're going to be looking at this really extraordinary struggle that we have, that once we have been fortunate enough to run into the thinking of a Colin Campbell or a John McDougall or a Caldwell Esselstyn or a Neil Barnard or a Dean Linish, if we have been fortunate enough to be exposed to these ideas and the evidence for them, we still struggle. Most people do. In fact, almost everyone. And so the question is, why is that true? So in order to figure that out, we're going to look at the nature of motivation, because ultimately motivation winds up being the thing it is that we're interested in looking at. It's the motive of the organism or the motive of the person. If I want to go this direction and I want to have these choices and I want to have those outcomes, why am I having difficulty getting myself to do it? The answer is you've got other motives. Okay? That's why. There's nothing physically stopping us from going this direction. What's stopping us is mental. Okay? So these are problems in behavioral regulation, and it's an issue of fighting what we're going to look at as competing demands in the nervous system. So in order to understand how the nervous system works and why motivation works the way it works, we're going to look at the following thing. Let's see now. Everybody knows what this is, of course.
Angry Birds.
Now is it clear what this is? No. What a crowd. You just really am on top of it. This is a gray shrike. This is a proud bird of the Mideastern desert. It's a bird of prey. This one's a male. You can tell by the distinctive markings. Now, what's going to go on is that all spring long, what this guy does is he flies around his territory and he kills bugs and he pokes them on thorns inside of his territory. Anybody want to guess why he might do such a thing?
What does he do with the bugs? He stores them somewhere?
What's that? Well, it could be that he's storing food. Okay, that's maybe why he puts bugs on thorns. And in fact, that's partially true, but it's not actually the main thing that drives his behavior. There's some other motivation that's driving him to poke bugs and put them on thorns.
The meat inside.
What's that?
The meat inside.
The meat inside?
Yes.
What, he's marinating it? That's a fasting, basically. He's not eaten for a while, so he's thinking about it. What's that?
Is he trying to attract somebody else?
Yes, he's actually trying to attract a mate. Okay, and it turns out that the way this works is that the males work very hard at this for several weeks, and they decorate up their trees with all these little dead bugs hanging from them. And then the females cruise into town, and they cruise through the territories there, and they see which guys have the most stuff in their trees, and then they mate with the guys with the most stuff. Shock this is. Okay? We know that this is true because an Israeli biologist went out and camped out in the desert and watched the spectacle. And what he found was, as he watched this thing, he then decided when the females came into town, he decided that he would do an experiment. And what he did was one night he moved all the stuff from one guy's tree to another guy's tree. And the next day, all the girls went over there. And then the next night, he moved all the stuff from that guy's tree back to this guy's tree, and then all the girls went over there. So this is how it is. I don't know why he had sailed that through an ethics committee. I mean, I don't think that's not legitimate science. But this is precisely how this works. And this actually helped us figure out a sociological mystery in Silicon Valley in the 1990s, why suddenly after the big internet boom, there's so many BMWs parked in trees, but this helped us. Now, so this is the story of motivation. So if we're trying to figure something out, it's going to turn out that there's going to be a reason. And the reason ultimately is going to be that all creatures, no matter what it is that they're doing, whatever you see them doing at all, they're fiddling with they're trying to dig a little bug out of their fur, or they're turning around in a circle, or they're rolling on the ground in the mud, or they're chasing a string. No matter what you see a creature doing, it's ultimately doing it in order to statistically increase the likelihood of its DNA being on the planet 1,000 years from now. Now that's something that psychologists today generally have no idea that this is true. So if you were to take the phone book of Los Angeles and call up every PhD psychologist in Southern California that is listed as a clinical psychologist on your insurance plan, not one of them could tell you this. Okay, so this is an extraordinary insight that has come out of evolutionary biology, that it actually helps us clear up the mystery of why creatures, not just people, but why all creatures do what they do, okay? And this is why it is that this works this way. Because this guy has a body that is designed in order to fit an ecological niche in nature. That body is a house, it's a box, it's a machine. And what that body does is it is actually a place where his DNA resides. So inside of that body, he has DNA. And the job of this life form is to get that DNA out into the world where it can find other DNA. That's actually what it's designed to do. In order to do that, it has to do something to accomplish that. And that thing that it has to do, it has to move. Okay. Animals have to move. A tree doesn't. So a tree has no motive. There's no such thing as a motivation for a tree. A tree has a biological purpose. In other words, it doesn't have the purpose, but the whole machine does. The whole thing is orchestrated without any flaws in that design. That thing is designed by nature as a device to reproduce DNA. That's why it has the leaf structure it has. That's why it has the root structure it has. It is a biological entity that has exactly one purpose and no other purpose, and that is to reproduce its DNA. This is also true of this guy. He has, I need to speak up. AJ's telling me to speak up, okay? Go ahead, just speak up, AJ. If you need to say something, speak up, and then I'll speak up, okay? It's going to turn out that the same is true of this guy. He is also, just like a tree, just like a flower, he is also designed with one fundamental biological purpose. And that fundamental biological purpose is the reproduction of DNA. Okay? In order to do that, he has to do something that the tree does not have to do, and that is that he has to move. Okay, so sometimes if you see plants and you see some tricky photographer has done time-lapse photography on ivy growing up a brick wall, it looks like the ivy's moving, right? And it's like, well, they're moving like we're moving, except they're just moving in slow motion. No, they're not. They're not moving at all. They're growing. It's completely different. Okay, so that if my hand is here and a second later it's here, it didn't grow from here to here. The muscles moved the body, and the muscles moved because of nerve impulses that came from the brain. And the brain had those specific impulses to move that hand because there was a reason. And that reason was I wanted to change my location relative to the environment in order to improve my circumstances for either survival or reproduction. And you're like, you've got to be kidding. Is that why I'm scratching my little thing right there? It's like, yeah, that's exactly why. I had a little impulse of an itch, and so I actually contract these muscles brilliantly as the neural circuits of the brain cause me to use, I can't get it with this, right? So I know that the way to get it is with this. And now as I start itching, probably some of you are going to start itching. And the reason why you're going to start itching is because we, as a group creature, as a group animal, as a human, it's going to turn out that if I'm itching, there's a possibility that there's some little parasite that's biting me. And if there's a little parasite that's biting me, that same parasite may have similar parasites in this locale, and they may be biting you. And because parasites are potentially going to be poisoning you, possibly infecting you, and therefore decreasing your likelihood of survival, it would be a good idea that if I start itching, that you should start itching. And I'm just waiting for the first of you to start itching. So, she got one. Okay, so this is how now I got another itch on my nose. So as we start thinking about it, what's going to happen is we're going to start to attend to a possible environmental threat, and that environmental threat is going to cause us to move. When you move, you don't move randomly. You move according to a goal that the organism is attempting to improve its situation in order to increase its likelihood of survival and reproduction. That may not be, for example, its own survival. It could be, for example, to move in order to increase the survival and reproductive success of its child. Okay, so an organism could absolutely move in such a way that would increase its own likelihood of death in order to increase the likelihood that its offspring would live. This is also part of survival and reproductive motivation. So you're going to find in many creatures, including humans, an extraordinary concern about their children and their children's ability to both survive and to reproduce. Okay, so this is Father's Day today. And so we actually have such a day, and we talk about such a day. It's a part of our culture. Why? Because fathers in this species are incredibly important. What do we mean by important? They're having a major influence on the statistical likelihood of an organism surviving and reproducing. That's what we mean by important, okay? In most mammalian species, this is not true. In most mammalian species, fathers are only devices that try to reproduce DNA. That's all they do, and they don't do any investment in offspring. In humans, they do huge investment in offspring, and we celebrate that, okay? Now, back to the bird. All right, so what this bird is attempting to do by putting bugs on thorns is it wants to become a father, okay? But it doesn't have a little image in his head where it says, gee, I'd really like to reproduce the double helix molecule that resides inside of me so that there'll be more of these molecules in the future. Of course not. What it has is feelings, okay? So this device is built in such a way that it wants to move, but it does not move randomly. It actually, if it moved randomly, there could possibly be a way that it could move that would be more effective. It could move randomly and attempt to try to deposit its DNA somewhere in the world, but if it moved randomly, it would be less likely to find food, it would be more likely to run into a predator, and be less likely to find a mate. But what if it could distinguish the difference between a mate and a predator? That would help it a lot, wouldn't it? So it would have a preference, and that preference would be coded in a way that it would have a feeling that it would want to move towards a mate and move away from a predator. So now we have motivation. So this thing moves not randomly, but it moves with motives, okay? It actually, what motive is it has energy that it directs at a specific behavioral pattern that will increase its likelihood of DNA being on the planet 1,000 years from now. If it moved in any other way, then it would be outcompeted with an organism that always had that to be the priority. You could say, well, wait a second, isn't there something more to life for this thing than ultimately reproducing its DNA, switch off your mind that you're a human with thousands of motives. Because you can't see why those motives are the way they are right now. Because you're so complicated, you can't understand that those motives are all triangulated around increasing the likelihood of your DNA molecule reproducing. You might say, how could that possibly be the case? Sometimes I actually try to do things to stop the DNA molecule from being reproduced. But in fact, when you do that, for example, if you use birth control, what you're actually trying to do is to do the actions that would statistically increase the likelihood of DNA being reproduced, but not have that outcome. You actually are overriding this, but you are essentially doing what the Stone Age brain was designed to do, which was to do the actions that would increase the likelihood of DNA surviving. Very interesting. That's what you want, you just don't want those consequences. Okay? You're the only species on Earth that would ever block those consequences. For all other species, all of those impulses, everything that they're doing is all about DNA success, DNA success, DNA success. And that's why it is that you have the feelings that you do. Every feeling that you have is an impulse that is actually trying to get you to do something that would statistically increase your likelihood of survival or reproductive success. So, now we know why this guy does what he's doing. We actually know why he has the feelings that he does. He distinguishes things in the environment. There's certain bugs he goes for, certain bugs he doesn't go for. He could be sloppy in what he does, but if he went for some bugs that were more problematic to put him on his tree than other bugs, if he did that, he would get outcompeted by a similar bird that was more efficient. Okay? So it's going to turn out over time, there's going to be three processes or three basic motivational foundations that will dictate how it is that he moves. And this will go on for his entire life. This is literally happening, from before he's actually born and comes out of his egg. He is designed by nature to move in ways that create pleasure, that avoid pain, and conserve energy. Okay? These three things is what I call the motivational triad. But these are the three major foundations of why creatures do what they do. They're either trying to feel good, they're trying to avoid feeling bad, or they're trying to do either one of those things or both at the same time, but do it as cheaply as possible. That's how it's going to work. So, Walmart, one of the great successes in world commerce, has on the side of their buildings, or at least they did. Some of I've seen a few that don't have it now, but they have 4 words on the side of their buildings. It says, "We sell for less." How simple can they make the concept? They're trying to get it into their customers. You can buy the same things here as you can buy over there, but it will cost you less. That's how it is. They are completely leaning here on the energy conservation strategy very, very successfully. All right, now, so this guy does what he does, and he flies around, he kills bugs, and he puts them on thorns, and he hopes for the best, and he hopes that he was efficient enough at getting enough bugs on thorns that his DNA will be reproduced. Now, what we're going to do now, though, is we're going to try to learn something from this life. And we're going to say, okay, well, now, wait a second. What if we do something to him? We know ultimately that he's got a goal, and that goal for all of the action that he does, his goal ultimately in this case is to have sex, which is going to cause a feeling of pleasure, and what that is going to do is that's going to reproduce the DNA molecule, and in fact what it's going to do, the way it is mechanically designed, is it's going to be a flood of dopamine in what we call the pleasure pathway, or the dopamine pathway of the brain. So there's a few chemicals that when they are in the locations of the brain that are sensitive, they will cause certain feelings. In fact, all of your feelings are caused by neurochemicals floating around neural circuits. That's the only way that you can have a feeling. So so this particular feeling of pleasure is going to be highly related to dopamine in what we call the reward pathway. Now, So this is what he's seeking, and he's going to have to hustle to get that done. And the reason why is that he's going to have competitors who are going to be doing the very same advertisements to the females in order to show that they've got the best stuff, okay? So that's what, it's all about the right stuff. It's like trying to be selected for the astronaut that goes to the moon. It's trying to be selected as the mate of the female in this case. And so he's going to do a tremendous amount of very efficient hustling in order to pull that off. If he's not successful, then he's not, and then his genes will be buried in the ground along with him. And so if he manages to get those genes to the next generation, then those genes were successful, they were sufficiently efficient and lucky, and they get to carry on. And that's how the life process works. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do something with this guy to try to learn something. And that is that we're going to put him in a cage. And in that cage, what we're going to have is we're going to have a couple of buttons. And the buttons are going to look like this. In one button, if he hits the green button, then what's going to happen is a trap door is going to open, or a door is going to open, and he's going to fly out into this aviary, and he's going to start killing bugs and putting them on thorns. That's how he's designed. If he hits the red button, this is going to be a magic button. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a trap door that's going to open in the bottom of the cage, and in is going to walk a female all ready to rock. Now, once he plays around with these buttons, which button is he going to be hitting?
I don't know.
He's going to hit the red button. Why?
Conservation of energy.
Conservation of energy principle. Okay? But one of them is more efficient. And so therefore, as soon as he figures out which one to hit, that's the one he's going to hit. Now we're going to put him back in the cage. And this time the green button is going to be the button where the trapdoor opens and the female appears, but in this is going to be the magic button. And in his head, we're going to put a little glass pipette, and in that pipette, we're going to put cocaine. And every time he hits that button, we're going to get a dose of cocaine right down into the dopamine pathway. And the way cocaine works is it causes dopamine to flood. That's actually the chemical action of dopamine. So, of cocaine. So when we put cocaine into the dopamine pathway, he will get a huge surge of dopamine. Now, which is he going to do?
Cocaine.
He's going to hit the cocaine. Why?
Seeking pleasure.
More pleasure. It could be more intense, but also the conservation of energy principle.
Yeah.
Literally less energy will be expended. Who needs all that humping and pumping? All he has to do is just hit a little lever, and there's no complaints, there's no problems, everything is cool. Okay? So this is exactly what he's going to do. And typically a laboratory animal put in that situation will continue to do that for several days until they die. Now, what's interesting about that is that if you could interview that creature and ask him, how's it going? He would say, it's going really well. I'm on a super roll. I feel a little odd it's so successful. I don't know why, but I feel fabulous. But it's a little out of control and strange, but that's what's happening. Okay? He wouldn't know he's committing suicide. Okay? Because he's not designed to have that kind of feedback. The feelings that you have are actually beautifully orchestrated feedback systems to tell you about opportunities and threats in the environment. That's what they're designed to do. Not only are they exquisitely organized to give you proper feedback, they're literally in relation to everything else. So for example, if I'm scratching an itch right here and I'm kind of stepping forward and I stumble on the carpet, I instantly recognize it's far more important just quit scratching this itch than it is to protect my limbs against falling. And so my hand would be pulled away instantly and head to the ground. I didn't learn that. Those are exquisitely engineered instincts where the different values, which what a value is what's important to an organism in terms of survival and reproductive probabilities. The value systems, the values calculus is already embedded in me at birth. I already know it's more important to quit scratching the itch and to save myself from falling. Nobody had to teach me. Nobody had to warn me. I didn't have to learn from the experience I already knew. If I'm a rabbit, I don't have to learn from experience that foxes are dangerous. I already know how dangerous they are. In fact, I can calibrate how dangerous they are relative to how far away from me that they are and how far the rabbit hole is. Okay? The engineering of the calculus that involves how to analyze cost-benefit probability estimates on gene survival is already in the system, which means that how we're motivated is already in the device. Incidentally, this is completely contrary to the 20th century view of how psychology works. So the mainstay theories of psychology, psychoanalysis and learning theory, are both completely wrong here. They actually believe that you learn your motivations, that you actually learn how to be a human and you learn to actually calibrate these choices, but that's not true. In fact, it is actually impossible for that to be true. You cannot be a rabbit and learn the threat of a fox. That already has to be in the system, because by the time you learn it, you pay with your life. Okay? I literally don't have time to learn how to calibrate the difference between stopping scratching the bug and falling on the floor. I already have to know it. So it's going to turn out that this machinery is unbelievably, exquisitely ingenious. And yet, we can make it make a mistake. We can make it make a mistake that's catastrophic. Okay? We can literally have this guy follow his motivational instincts right to suicide. Okay? This is what Dr. Alan Goldhammer and I call the pleasure trap. The pleasure trap takes place when you have changed the environment so substantially that the inputs on the nervous system cause varying degrees of miscalculation about what the organism should be doing with its time and energy and its movements. Okay? In this case, he'll hit the red button and he'll be gone. He'll be gone in a couple of weeks. Incredible. Okay? He can't learn to not do that. Now, this I learned about this in grad school, and it was a long time before I put this together, that this is of course what's taking place with respect to health and diet. Okay, so what's taking place is that the diet is now the food is a hyper stimulation of the dopamine pathway. And the way this works is that the foods are no longer the natural substances that the organism was exquisitely designed to calibrate its value. Instead, it's what we're going to call supernormal stimuli. So drugs are the ultimate of supernormal stimuli. Because they're not normal, the system can't calibrate the cost-benefit analysis of the risk-reward ratio effectively, and it makes mistakes. It gets trapped. Okay? And the same thing is going to be true anytime you start to artificially alter the neurochemistry of the system. You're going to get mistakes. Okay? The mistakes aren't going to be random, they're going to be systematic. So if it turns out that what's going to happen in this case is that this animal will be hitting this cocaine button over and over again, even though it's very deficient of calories because it's not eating, it's not drinking water, okay? It's not sleeping. In other words, its system is in chaos. But what it feels a compulsion, the right thing to do to increase its likelihood of gene survival is to keep hitting the button to get the next hit of cocaine. Okay? That's because it's getting a false feedback system that's so loud, it's drowning out the body's ability to actually detect other motivations. Just as the way all motivation works. You're always having other motives that are telling you there's things you could be doing with your time and energy, but the most dominant one is the one that has your attention, and that's why you're doing what you're doing. But the reason you're doing what you're doing is exquisite calculus telling you this is the best use of your time. Okay? This is what you should be doing. Now, you could be wrong or you could be right, but that's what the computational system is designed to do. However, if you artificially disturb the neurochemistry of the system, we're going to get inexorable errors. The only question is, what is the magnitude of those errors? The more you disturb the neurochemistry, the greater the degree of mistake that you're going to get. This is why you're going to get cocaine addicts selling their infant children. Okay? This is why, because everything is so badly disturbed that you're going to get extraordinary mistakes in what is in fact in the organism's best interest. Okay? Now, with food, it isn't that extreme, obviously. So, in food, what we're going to have is we're going to have the following problem. That here's a little graph that will tell the story of the pleasure graph. So this is going to be essentially how much pleasure, or in this particular, it could be dopamine. There's other pleasure chemicals, but this is the chief chemical. That here's the amount of dopamine that we get from a given bit of food. So if we have whole natural foods here, then it's going to turn out that there's going to be a variable amount of dopamine that's going to depend upon chiefly two factors. And what all neurochemicals are doing is they're attempting to engineer for you and to signal to you values. Okay? The value to the organism with respect to gene survival. It's literally, the values aren't ethereal. They're not a matter of debate. What they are is they're actually biological probabilities. That's what they are. So the value of a given food is going to be variable depending upon the state of the organism. If the organism is in severe deprivation for food, then the value of the food becomes greater. Every calorie becomes potentially 10 times as valuable, which is why after you water fasted for a couple of weeks, the food is going to be exquisite tasting. Just promising. These are the promises we make at fasting facilities. You know what I mean? This is the story we tell you, okay? But of course you can see that this is exactly how it should work. It should work that the peak experience of food should be, if I'm starving to death and now you feed me, the food should taste exquisite now. And generally, that's going to be the case. Now, it's also true that all natural food isn't going to be the same in terms of its ability to elicit a dopamine response, because the organism is actually a biological, biochemical device that obeys the laws of physics. And the way this thing is engineered is it's actually a method for transforming energy into DNA. That's what a life form is. It's a transformational process of transforming energy to DNA. So it would make sense that it would be exquisitely sensitive to energy expenditures and energy acquisition. It should be designed to try to get more for less. And so it would make sense that it would be able to signal when food was worth more. And it does. So the greater the calorie density of the food, the more an animal enjoys it. That isn't a perfect correlation because there's other considerations with respect to food other than just calorie density. If you have food that's rotting, even though it's got a lot of calories in it, it also threatens you with bacterial infection. Okay? And we've all felt that. Okay? We've all had some fried chicken back in your past that had been in the refrigerator just a little too long, and you were like, should I eat this or not? And you can feel the allure of the calorie density, but you're also a little worried about some of the smell. The smell's a little off. Okay? You can see two different neural circuits battling over what it is that you should do. And there's an apple over there on the counter. It's like, well, the apple's 300 calories a pound. It's safe. But on the other hand, it doesn't have the same hit as barbecue chicken with a bunch of sugar and fat sauce. It's about 12 or 1,300 calories a pound. So at 4 or 5 times the calorie density, this thing I'm willing to risk, essentially getting poisoned. It's a nervous system running a cost-benefit analysis through an exquisite set of machinery trying to figure out what's in your best interest. Sometimes it's difficult. In fact, it's generally always difficult. The brain's job is to run these very deep, complicated computations And what looks like a seamless process is actually a process of extraordinary computational complexity. Now, so all things being equal, you're going to like food better that has greater calorie density. That's why you like steamed carrots better than you like raw salad, because the steamed carrots are 200 calories a pound and the raw salad is 100. You generally like peaches and cherries better than you like carrots because they're 300 calories a pound. If you're particularly hungry, cherries may be sweet and you may like them a lot, but you actually don't want to eat a slew of them for dinner. And that's because you're really not designed to make your diet based around food that's 300 calories a pound. That's not the kind of organism that you are. If you're a koala bear, you are. The koala bear is going to eat food that's 100 calories a pound. That's what it does all day, but not a human. So humans actually designed by nature to be looking for food of higher calorie densities. And so as a result, you like potatoes, rice, and beans more than you like cherries, because those are 400 or 500 calories a pound, and you can tell the difference. You don't want to sit down at dinner with a big thing of cherries and say, wow, this is a fine dinner. You might like some of them, but that's actually not what it is that you want to be eating the bulk of your food from, right? So why is that? Because you're designed by nature to be engineering your motivation, aiming for the food that is going to satisfy the problem of survival most efficiently. So whole natural foods this is going to be tastier, this is going to be less tasty, depending upon, number one, how hungry you are, in other words, how valuable the food is. All things being equal, if you were much hungrier, the response of exactly the same food would be higher. Okay? This is also, all things being equal, the response of the same food would be lower. This is after you're already full and it's 8:30 at night and you already had a big, perfectly healthy dinner, and you're feeling like you want to eat something else. And you call up AJ or you call up Dr. Gersfeld and you say, I'm just having this feeling that I want to eat something else. And they say, well, no problem. Don't you have a bunch of steamed vegetables? Why don't you just go into the refrigerator and pull them out? No, that's not what I was thinking. Yes, of course that isn't what you were thinking, because it turns out that you're not hungry, and therefore the value for activating the dopamine pathway with respect to that food is very low. It's not worth it. Okay? What would be worth it? Something that would signal much louder its survival value to you, which is going to be the soy ice cream down at the store. It's going to be 1,400 calories a pound. That suddenly, ding, the light bulb goes on, right? So all things being equal, the different calorie densities of the food are going to have different response, and all things being equal, in terms of the food is going to have different value depending upon how hungry you are. But we're going to forget about how hungry you are for the moment and just say the food is going to have a certain dopamine response depending upon its biological value to you, which is chiefly the calibration of how many calories there are per pound. There's, interestingly enough, the energy conservation imperative has another component to it that's very interesting. So when I wrote The Pleasure Trap, I did not know this. It actually wasn't known, so it's not my fault. Okay? And that is that there's actually two components involved in energy conservation in food that will drive how motivated an animal is to eat it. Number one will be the calorie density. Number two will be how soft it is. The softness of a food is a major issue, because if a food has been pulverized, it requires less energy to digest it. That is why hamburger is the official food of the United States, not steak burger. Steak burger would be far more efficient for industry to use. They would put it in slices. It would keep a lot better because of the integrity of the food. You wouldn't expose it to oxidation by grinding it up and having all of that exposed. It would be much more efficient to make it a steak burger. But a steak burger didn't make it. And the reason is that if you grind the food and with a grinder, you take that electrical energy and you grind it through some steel teeth, then these teeth and these muscles don't have to do the job. And if they don't have to do the job, and the stomach muscles don't have to work as hard to deal with tearing apart more intact chunks of food, it's going to turn out it takes about 12.5% less energy to digest the food. 12.5% energy difference is massive. It is a massive difference of efficiency. So it's the difference, it's literally taking a foodstuff that would be 300 calories a pound, and we're gonna turn it into 335 calories a pound. It's like, whoa, we just made the food a lot more concentrated. When you realize that the average woman in the United States gains 2 pounds a year between her 15th and her 35th birthday. That's how she puts on those 40 pounds. 2 pounds a year. That's how subtle that is. That's about 8,000 calories of fat that's stored per year over 365 days. That's about 20 calories a day. She eats 2,000 calories a day. That means she's systematically overeating by 20 over 2,000, 1%. So literally an increase of 1% of efficiency of the food that gets slipped by the normal satiety mechanisms that weren't designed for it. A 1% efficiency is all it is required to have somebody gain 40 pounds in 20 years. So do you think a 12% difference is a big deal? It's an enormously big deal. Okay, so that's a second variable of efficiency. It is a major change in the environment of a human. You weren't designed to eat foods that were so extraordinarily soft. That's also why you have orthodontists. You would have never had orthodontists had you not had food being ground up and pulverized and made soft. Okay, by having children eat food that are very, very soft, what happens is it doesn't stress the jaw. The jaw therefore doesn't grow, and there isn't enough room for the teeth to come in. And as a result of that, you have to have orthodontists. Okay, I went to an authority that told me that he could tell by looking at my jaw that had my jaw been properly stressed as a child, my parents knowing what to do to feed me, then I would have had a much wider jaw. It would have looked remarkably like Brad Pitt's jaw. All right, so what we're going to see here is that whole natural foods are going to have a certain normal amount of dopamine activation. But what if we make the food softer and richer? What if we do that? What if we take the food, instead of 500 calories a pound, we start feeding people food that's 1,500 calories a pound? What if we do that? Okay. If we do that, what's going to happen is we're going to feed the organism a diet that's going to hyperactivate the dopamine pathway. And so what's going to happen is it will be instantly preferred. It's not even close. Just try. You got a kid somewhere, a grandkid somewhere, you can put out some a chocolate shake with French fries. Notice how soft those are. Notice the chocolate shake, it takes no chewing. And a cheeseburger, white bread, ground beef, and cheese. Okay, nothing in there. The only thing that crunches in there is a little bit of pickle and a little tiny bit of lettuce. So there's essentially no stress on the jaw, super high calorie density food, and we're going to do that, and that's what's going to happen. You try to feed them that as opposed to a bunch of steamed vegetables and rice, not a chance. It's not even close. So this is what's going to happen. There's going to be a hyperactivation of the dopamine pathway. It's instantly preferred. It turns out that experiments with every species have shown that when you feed any food that is higher in calorie density, they instantly prefer it. Okay? It's so much so the case that in a rat study done in 2009, they fed rats their normal rat chow, and of course no health problems systematically taking place there. And then what they did was for a month, they fed them the standard American diet. When they did that, the rats instantly start gaining major amounts of weight. They instantly start getting things like high blood pressure. In other words, they start to get insulin resistance, all the things that you would expect to start happening. At the end of 30 days, they then took the junk food out of the cage and put back in the normal rat chow. The average rat did not eat a morsel for 14 days. 14 days they water fasted. It's actually been reported that one of those rats lifted a paw and gave a gesture to the experimenters as a result of This is what's going to happen. So junk food is going to do this, but interestingly enough, is that it will not stay up here at an extraordinary abnormal pleasure response. What's going to happen is it's going to seesaw its way back down. Okay? This process is known in neuroscience as neuroadaptation. So the nerves adapt to, you essentially brighten up the lights in a room, and it's a major impact on the sensory nervous system, and then it gets used to it. Okay? The nerves adapt to the higher degree of sensory intensity. So the body can also ultimately adapt. So if you're walking around long enough without shoes, you're going to get substantial calluses on your feet. So there will be an adaptation to essentially defend the system against a higher level of intensity of any kind of stimulus. So this is what's going to happen. So this is going to be what I would call stages of the pleasure trap. So stage 1 is where it is that we belong. Stage 2, we've introduced supernormal stimuli that was never seen on the planet in our ancestral history. And so what's going to happen is, in this case, it's supernormal in the pleasure pathway, so therefore it's going to be extraordinarily attractive. What's going to happen then is that the system is going to get used to it. The nervous system is going to adapt to that because it's going to need to be making discriminations between the different stimulus intensities, and now it's only interested in the extraordinarily rich stuff, not just, this was the first time it ever saw, I don't know, a chocolate bar, okay? So it's like, holy smokes. But later on, what's going to happen is there's going to be competing other things that are going to be so intense that it's going to make discriminations, and pretty soon that's a Snickers bar, just not a normal chocolate bar. Normal chocolate bar is sweet and fat, which are two chemicals that never come together in nature, okay, except in mother's milk. So sweet and fat, fruit is sweet, but there's no fat in it, okay? Animal fat is fatty, or an avocado or nuts, but there's no sweet in it. Those are two independent neural pathways into the pleasure centers of the brain that aren't designed to be simultaneously activated unless you're a young mammal that you need to be unbelievably reinforced to stay near your mother. Oh, pretty good trick, right? As soon as you're weaned, you aren't designed by nature to have those two pathways simultaneously activated. But what if we make a chocolate bar, which is super high fat, super high sugar, and we activate them both at the same time? We wind up with a fortune called the Mars Company, right? Now we get even smarter that we get we can add peanuts to it, and we can salt the peanuts, and now we get a Snickers bar. So now we get sugar, fat, and salt. We get all three pleasure chemicals being simultaneously highly concentrated and not distracted by any fiber and water or any other non-tasty processes or non-tasty molecules. So we get a maximum impact on the system. And so now, however, after a while, only the richest thing gets us to the top of even the normal curve. Okay? Now we get an interesting problem. So now, here, if we sit here for long enough, we wind up with health problems. This is where they come from. They come from a consistent diet of supernormal stimuli that is overly rich for the organism's natural history. Does it survive? Yes, but it survives with biological compromise. This is where you're going to get problems. Okay, so as a result of this, right here is where a few people get lucky. They're smart enough, they're alert enough, they're motivated enough, they're open-minded enough, and they happen to find a John McDougall. They happen to find a Chef AJ. They happen to find, Alan Goldhammer or a Dean Ornish. They listen to a Colin Camp. Somewhere they look at Forks Over Knives. they find out they're rare. Okay, it's probably one in 200 people, one in 100. It's like 1% of the United States, and vastly less than that worldwide. A very, very select few of people will ever get this information. Now, if they do, what we find out is something incredible. That even though they get this information, it's extremely difficult for them to use it. And the reason it's difficult for them to use it is because of the following. If you then find out that you should be doing things differently, what happens when you go from a high-intensity stimulus to a low-intensity stimulus is exactly the opposite of what happens when you go from low to high. So that's what's going to happen. So what's going to happen is we're actually going to wind up at a subnormal amount of dopamine being released. Here we have a supernormal amount. So this is extraordinary experience for the organism, highly motivating. This is actually a devastating experience for the organism, where the organism says, we just made the wrong move. So now we have the answer to the question that I started with. If you know the right thing to do, if you're bright enough, alert enough, motivated enough, and lucky enough, and you got this information, why is it so difficult? The answer is because when you do the right thing, it feels wrong, and when you do the wrong thing, it feels right. The reason is every single instinct in you is being spun exactly 180 degrees in the wrong direction. Now, can you get out? Yes, you can. If you continue what's going to happen on whole natural food, we're going to get right back to the beginning. So the system will come back to homeostasis. It will come back to where it belongs. It will never like natural foods as much as it can like supernormal foods if it's got an unadulterated palate. The pleasure trap is always out there. Okay? It's always out there ready to get somebody. But this is why this problem is so difficult. Now, there are many theories for many reasons about why this is hard. And poor Chef AJ, you've got a few more years of me talking about this, that you're going to have, I'm going to be pounding people because you're an extraordinarily gifted educator and inspirational person that really helps attract people to this message. And Nathan as well, and True North as well, and my friends in this whole movement. They are fine educators, and they give the message and they give people the right direction. However, people are still confused as to why it's difficult. And because they're confused, and embarrassed, and frustrated, and depressed, okay? And they can't figure out why this is so hard. They start to wander around looking for explanations that are false. But they are more appealing in certain ways. They actually tickle the nervous system in certain ways that they seem more reasonable, and they also give us profound level of excuse. The reason why I'm having trouble is I've got problems with my relationship with my father. The reasons why I'm having troubles is I went through a very difficult time a few years ago. The reason is that 20 years ago I had some traumatic experiences that happened to me, and I just haven't gotten over it, and that's what really drives me to do this. Wrong, 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 and wrong again. There's not a single scrap of scientific evidence that supports any of those theories, and in fact there is a tremendous amount of evidence that checkmates it. That is not why people are in this problem. The reason is here. Okay? The reason is that you are engineered by nature to pursue the most reinforcing, pleasurable sensory experiences that you can. Those are the guidance systems that were engineered into the simplest of animal organisms more than 1 billion years ago. And they remain inside of you today. Incredibly, it's the same neurochemistry. You'll find the same dopamine pathway in a gopher in your yard. You'll find the same dopamine pathway in a horse that you feed an apple to. You'll find the same dopamine pathway in a dung beetle that's eating manure. It's the dopamine pathway. this is the problem. And no other animal has ever had the problem where it had to deal with supernormal stimuli that it was not natural for the species, that was more concentrated, more intense, more biologically efficient at activating the dopamine pathway. No organism has ever faced this. Only humans have done it to themselves. Okay? This is a deeply mysterious and confusing problem. It's extremely frustrating. It is difficult to get yourself to go against your instincts and get upright again. Okay? That's why you have a place like Dr. Nathan's place here. This is a place to get yourself back, see the world right side up again. This is why it is that we need coaching. This is why it is that we need support, we need good information, and mostly we need compassion for the fact that this is difficult and that you're going to struggle and that you're going to stumble and then you're going to get on your knees and then you're going to have to get back up again. Okay? But a mistake, and a very seductive one, is to say, the reason why I'm doing this is something in the past that has to be fixed. No, that's a mistake. And if you are believing that, then you're going to need to listen to me more as I, in future months, make this exceptionally clear to the point where hopefully I can convince you that this is not the case. That what you need to do is to focus very hard on this problem. And actually the most important part of the problem is going to be the environmental opportunity to get into this. This is why Chef AJ and I say 1,000 times, work harder on your environment than you do on yourself. If you try to look inside yourself and try to find the mysterious reasons why it is that you're self-destructive in this area, you will not find them. Okay? You will find false explanations, you will find seductive explanations, you will find comforting explanations, but you will not find the explanation. The explanation is here. It's in those same rats that after 30 days would not eat their natural food. That's incredible, okay? And it's the same thing with us. So this is the story of the pleasure trap. And the way we get out is by doing the rough sledding between here and here. You can do it in water fast and make it shorter. Water fast will make this a much quicker process. You can also do it by the deliberate, determined self-discipline that is required to get through a period of effectively drug withdrawal. Okay? This withdrawal will not have you shaking like if you're getting off cigarettes or heroin. It won't have you in the DTs as if you're getting off a big alcohol problem. But it will have you in the nighttime saying, I'm sort of hungry, not exactly, and I just called up Dr. Nathan and he told me to go into my refrigerator and look for the steamed vegetables. And I am rebelling. And what I want is something else. And now we know what that something else is. Okay? And that motivation will be more intense the more the shorter in time the distance has been between when you last had it. Your nervous system is designed by nature to be having its analytics about motivation circle around opportunity. If it knows you just had some junk food 3 days ago, it is reminded of it more quickly. You remember it better. If it's in the pantry or in the refrigerator, then you really know. So that's the problem. Does this all make sense? Okay, I got a question.
And what if you have the inability to control your environment?
Yeah.
Because everyone around you, friends, family, etc., don't agree with what you're trying to
It's no problem, you just poison them.
I don't want to go to jail.
What you do is you control the environment the best you can. That's all you can do. So I won't turn this over to AJ. AJ has a rather draconian view of how it is that we fix our environments. But there's things that we can do that are useful. For example, we can negotiate with people in our environment that the things that are the most alluring for us, we don't want those in there. The things that are not that alluring for us, we don't need to have a completely clean environment. We just need it to be as clean as possible for us. I could literally live in a house where there was Parmesan cheese and that there was cheese of different kinds, and that there was bratwurst and salami. Like, it'd be slightly disgusting to smell it, but I would not be tempted. Okay? But if you have somebody with nut or butter peanut butter sandwich cookies around, now I got a problem. Okay, so I have to make sure that my environment's clean for the things that are triggers for me, and so that's what I would negotiate as best you can on that dimension. Okay, so we don't have to be ruthless about it. We have to be strategic, and that's the best thing that we can do. Okay, all right. Other questions? Yes.
Substitutes for refined sugars.
Yeah.
Chef AJ was making a dessert that had bananas in it.
Yes.
Has some saturated fat, but you have some untouched sugars like dates. Can you use those as little treats and still maintain that healthy diet?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Just quantities of honey.
You weren't designed to not have sweets hit your tongue, and you weren't designed to not have fat hit your tongue. So the sweetest thing in nature is going to be honey, and it would appear from the anthropological evidence that human beings probably ate 10% of their calories from honey, which is phenomenal. So that's a couple hundred calories a day, which surprisingly starts to speak to my sweet tooth. Okay, so it's like, oh, that's what's going on. So that doesn't adulterate the palate. What will start to adulterate the palate is when we put unnatural combinations together. So now we have chocolate bars. Okay, well that's sugar, fat, and salt, all hitting the pathway at the same time. That's a supernormal stimuli that is going to cause a habituation to that's going to put us in a trap where natural food doesn't taste good. So I'm not worried about some of these things that you're talking about. Those are in normal, benign balances that are generally not a problem. Okay? I'm not worried about nuts either, but here's where it gets interesting. If we make it a nut butter, what did we just do?
Soften it.
We just softened it. We just softened it. So we just took it from 2,500 calorie pound nuts, and we just added 12% to its biological efficiency, and now we just made it into the richest, a richer food than any of your ancestors ever got. Oops. Is it any wonder where there's a whole aisle in the grocery store of nut butter? That's why it's there, okay? And so if you actually think about a peanut butter sandwich, the nut butter is 2,500 calories a pound. They add a bunch of salt to it. Then you put jelly on there, which is essentially dried fruit that's been sugared up, so it's about 1,400 calories a pound. You put it on bread that's about 1,700 calories a pound that is super soft dried out starch. And now what do we have is we have something that's about 2,000 calories a pound. Well, guess what? That 2,000 calories a pound is 2.5 times the calorie density of steak. Oops. Is it any wonder why vegans are having a hard time losing weight? Because they need to understand calorie density. They need to understand that we need to be looking out for supernormal stimuli even within a vegan diet. Okay? So that's how that works. Peanut butter sandwich is a heck of a lot healthier for you than a steak, but it's not better for your weight loss. Yeah. All right. Hand halfway up. No? Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're talking about the sweetener. I find that because I used to be pre-diabetic like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
So I changed my sugar. I didn't have any honey or anything that has a high glycemic index.
Yes.
So I went to start using stevia. It's
Yeah.
0 calorie and 0 GI. But that took me out of the pre-diabetic level.
Yes.
Which is great. And if I have to make my own butter or nut butter, almond or peanut, then I could use the Vitamix or blend in one of those two and add the stevia. That I would still get the benefit of the nut, but without the glycemic index being shooting up.
Okay. As long as look, you maneuver it around however you like. Whenever I start hearing, well, use the Vitamix, when I do this, like, okay.
I know, because like you said, it's less energy. You conserve the energy because you're breaking it down to the cellular level, which is what you want for easier assimilation of the.
That's
of
what
the-
you want, but it's not ideal for you.
Right.
Right.
But there are also other foods that I could chew.
Yes, you could.
But I could still use my jaws. That's just because for me personally, I had some fillings. Okay.
God, because
And
you don't
I
want
had
to
some,
chew as much.
I don't have to chew
Yeah.
as hard as much because I don't want to. It's more expensive for me.
Yeah.
If you want to consider the cost analysis, benefit analysis will be cost ineffective for me because I have to see my dentist more often.
Right, got it. You know, as long as you're healthy and this is working for you, I'm not against processing of foods. We have to look at that at each individual and see if this is a problem. So if I have somebody that's having trouble losing weight, the first places I look is I look towards processed foods. Most specifically, the first place I look is the ultimate processed food, which is oil. Okay. The second thing I then look for is the processing of carbohydrate, and so I'm looking through that lens of the food processing. But for an individual that is doing things like putting whole natural foods in a Vitamix and they like it and they're not having any negative consequences for it, I have no objection to that at all. Okay.
But let me add one thing.
Yes.
I also find that it's if I soak the almond and all other nuts and grains, it actually releases the energy, and the energy is stored in it, so it's more beneficial for me. I still use my jaw, but it's less.
You got it. All good. Very good.
So good.
All right. Other questions?
Would
Yes.
you refuse to cook for your family if that's, like in my case, they expect me to cook 2 meals every night, and I've been doing that for 2 years, and I don't even like touching meat or anything like that, but if I don't cook for them, then they're going to KFC or getting a pizza or getting McDonald's, so I do because I want them to be as reasonably healthy as possible, but they refuse to eat anything I cook of my own.
Right.
So
How old are they?
Oh, my husband is 60.
Yeah.
64.
Who else is involved?
My daughter-in-law.
Which is how old?
40.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I think it's time for you to cook for yourself, and maybe you cook for your husband. But why are we? I mean, I'm not going to get into questions, but it's one
it
thing.
makes it more difficult to be. It makes it very difficult for me.
To what's difficult is to do what? To not cook or to cook?
I don't like to cook for them.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is your husband's got 2 hands. If you don't want to do this, then don't do it, okay? And the way we institute changes like this in your life is to run experiments. So we don't declare that we're making a change and that we have now renegotiated a international contract. That's not what we're going to do. What we do is we say that we're running an experiment, okay? And so we can say, you know what? I just feel like running an experiment. And I think that what I'm going to do now is that I'm just going to focus on my own food and what it is that I'm doing. And you guys kind of just do your own number, and let's just see how that works out. And when it turns out that they just go to KFC and do what they do, oh well. Okay? You could be operating under a misapprehension, which is the difference of the food that you cook for them being substantially different than the food that they would get at KFC. It's about the same. It's not any difference. It's like getting a C on a chemistry paper, getting a 62 on a chemistry paper, and getting a 60. And what's the difference? Okay? So the differences there in their health outcomes are so slight that it's not worth you stressing about. I would absolutely tell them that I'm just going to run a little experiment. I'm just going to see how it all works out if everybody just does their own number. That sounds reasonable. It does sound reasonable if you had a child that's 12, but your child is 42. Time for them to pick up a spatula if they want to. Okay? All right. Sound good? All right, folks. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Chef AJ, thank you so much for recording this and putting all
Yes. Fabulous. Thanks for having me.
If people want more information on the fasting escape,
Yeah, you can go to www.fastingescape.com or give us a call, 714-936-6367. So.
It's beautiful. Beautiful
Thank you.
place.
Excellent.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Appreciate everybody coming out.